get when we don't sin. If we don't hate, we get love. You can't be negative toward things. You have to love it or hate it. It's not really a, well, I just don't like it. It's not a vegetable. You know, these are human beings or things. Nah, I don't care why. I hate Brussels sprouts, even though they say Brussels sprouts are the best things to ever come upon the face of the earth. But, you know, I just don't like it, period. I hate Brussels sprouts. I never will like Brussels sprouts. But we have to love each other. We have to love people. It's not a choice. We don't have a choice in these things. We have to love. And if we don't hate, we have to have love. This is the way it is. There's just, it's either, there cannot be a spiritual void. You know, if God isn't there, then there has to be something there. If it's not God, what is it? It's the opposite of God. It's the devil, it's demons. If there's no angel there, there has to be a demon. It can't be nothing. There can never be nothing spiritual. Anything else?
I have one.
Yes.
You said about before, talking about Christmas and the sort of dates.
Yes.
Some Orthodox churches recognize or like to do it on the 25th.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
What was the reason for that? Was that accepted by the...
It's not accepted by, it's tolerated by Moscow. The reason for it is in the first immigration of Russians from Ukraine to Russia at the revolution, okay, and before, you know, the economic reality of Tsarist Russia was not very pleasant either. And they ended up coming to America in the teens, in the early 20s. It was a great immigration. That's where my grandparents came here. And they actually sat down and had a meeting. Now, in Russia, the Julian calendar was the reality. The October Revolution is called the October Revolution because it happened in October in Russia. But the rest of the world, it was in November. So it's celebrated in November, but they call it the October Revolution because it happened in October according to the Julian calendar. Now we follow the Julian calendar, and the church continues to. They didn't change it in Russia until after the revolution. One of the first things the Soviet Union did was change the calendar because it was so intertwined with the church. Now when people came here, the Greeks did it in 1926 under pressure from the Muslims. Rome changed the calendar in the 1800s, early 1700s, because George Washington was born on the Julian calendar and they didn't accept it, but he died on the Gregorian calendar. He was the transition in America. He was born on one calendar and died on another. It wasn't universally accepted in the world until 1926. Really, that the Gregorian calendar, the papal calendar, would be accepted as a civil calendar. At that point, the Greeks accepted the new calendar and forcibly accepted the new calendar. They do celebrate Christmas on Western December 25th and celebrate Easter the old way. People in this country, my grandparents, in fact, had a vote. Should we celebrate Christmas on January 2nd through December 25th? And they voted to keep it, my grandmother voted to keep it on, to go with December 25th. My grandfather said no, and January 7th. And so that was a division point in my family history. No, they never got along from that point on. And so they would go to, my grandmother would go to church on December 25th, and my grandfather would go to church at the other church on January 7th. And that's just the way it was. You know, and it kind of blossomed into having two Christmases almost, because they would argue constantly about it. The church, you know, if you're going to change the church, the OCA has a new calendar, the Greeks have the new calendar, the Antiochians have the new calendar, they don't know what they do with it. The problem with the new calendar is that we have certain events that take place in the church year. And one of them is the Apostles' Fast, that fast in the summertime. And it's important to keep that fast. Even though it's a minimal fast, it's not really strictly enforced, it's important to keep in mind what's going on in the church and to, you know, remember that fast and to try our best to keep it as best we can. And when you have the new calendar, it is chopped out, it can be non-existent. And that's a problem, because it doesn't fulfill the actual cycle of the church. It doesn't allow, it skips it. It's like a bump in the road. It's caught in the pothole, and it kind of jumps, and it's kind of an odd thing. Certainly, you know, if the church changes the calendar and they're talking about it again in Moscow, should we accept the new calendar? And most of the people are saying no. That vote comes up every so often, every 7 or 8 years. And it's being talked about now, as a matter of fact, among the clergy. You know, are we going to, there's a big discussion on the clergy list about language, first of all, and about calendar. If we are sister church with the OCA, why don't we just give it up and start acting like the OCA? And that's a valid argument. And the bishops have yet to respond. You know, why are we still continuing plodding on with the beard and the hair and no pews, you know, no organs, and why are we continuing to do this? It doesn't matter. I think it does. I think it matters a great deal. I think the calendar is a blessed thing. I think the church calendar is a sacred thing. It was used by our fathers and by our forefathers, and I think only because of that we should continue to use it. We shouldn't bow to Western culture. I believe that's something that just leads us away from grace. That leads us away from peace and sanctity. I think we can, if we maintain our own calendar and celebrate Christmas the way we have done for centuries and centuries and centuries on this one day, I think it's a holy thing. And we need more holiness in our lives. We need more sanctity in our lives, and peace in our lives, and truth in our lives. And I think that's very important. So I think the calendar, yes, it's an arguable point, but I think that it's very important to keep the church calendar intact. My personal opinion. What do you think?
No, I wasn't too sure. I mean, I know, like at the church in Maceland,
they celebrate Christmas. And I think that lessens the beauty of it. I think that lessens the sanctity when you just go along with the flow. The only reason that they changed it was because they wanted to fit in with the rest of society. They wanted to be more American. They didn't want to be communists. You know, I mean, the McCarthy era was real. You know, they didn't want to be foreigners. They talked with accents. It was tough. You know, you lived in New York. You didn't have any. You know, you only had friends in your neighborhood. They moved to areas like Vinyl and Millville and Dorothy, in little enclaves of their own people to protect themselves, because it's scary when you can't communicate. It's a frightening thing when you're alone in the world. My grandmother never learned English to any great extent. And it must have been horrifying for her. So in an attempt to try to fit in, they changed the calendar. Because it was important. They couldn't speak the language, they ate weird food, their kids smelled like garlic when they went to school. They didn't speak English. My mother didn't speak English first. You know, she was, my grandmother was a you know, peasant woman. She brought cold beans to school and embarrassed my mother in church one time because she forgot lunch. She said, eat, good cold beans, eat. You know, and all the kids laughed at her. And she desperately wanted to be American. She didn't want to be foreign. You know, that this was the way it is. And that was their attempt to try to fit in with American society, because they were really, you know, these people who came over were just dirt farmers. They were nothing fancy. They were peasants. They were just people like us. You know, they weren't wealthy, and they tried to fit in, and that was their reasoning for doing it. But I think that reason for doing it now is lost. People, sorry. The second immigration, different situation.
It's still a poor excuse. You take Jewish religion, they have not changed their calendar, they're still holding on to their calendar no matter what.
I agree, and the Muslims are the same.
So they're not
changing. They have their own calendar, and I agree. I think we should not change it. I agree. I'm 100%, you know, I believe that the calendar is a sacred thing. And we need to keep our own calendar, if only because it's Orthodox, and it's by our fathers. And
one question about like Orthodox cross. The third bar down the bottom.
Yes.
Is there any significance?
We like to suffer. We like to suffer. No, it's called the cross of St. Andrew. I don't know why it's called the cross of St. Andrew, because St. Andrew, actually St. Andrew's cross is an X. Because the Holy Apostle Andrew was crucified on an X. And so when you see in the Russian naval flags, and you see it in in various things. Well, you see in Acts a lot, not here, but on a lot of Russian things. How do you pretty much see it in Acts? And that is the cross of St. Andrew, because St. Andrew was the apostle of the Slavs. He was the one who came to Kiev and looked upon the hills and said, from this area, blah, blah, blah. You know the story. And we knew the story, right? Apostle Andrew came. He came to Kiev and he traveled through Greece and he came up from Turkey and Constantinople. He went to the hills of Kiev and he said, from these hills a great church will arise. And it will live to see the end of the world, and it will save the world. And sure enough, here we have the Russian Orthodox Church. It's sprung forth from Kiev. But anyway, in the early part, when Rus was baptized, that was considered to be a valid cross. It wasn't very popular, but it was. There were several different expressions of the cross. There's a Jerusalem cross that has a big cross in the middle, and then little crosses in the corners. The swastika is actually a valid form of a cross. We don't use it anymore for obvious reasons, but that's where Hitler got it from, was the gates of a monastery in Vienna. It was probably the gates up around this Vienna monastery. The swastika, as we said, that was a really cool symbol to be. But it became very popular in Russia because it wasn't Roman Catholic. Okay, so the top part symbolizes the nameplate. Jesus Christ, King of the Jews. And of course, the middle part symbolizes the arms, where the arms are nailed. And this bottom piece is a corruption of the foot plate that was really used in Jesus' time. There was actually, at crucifixions, there really was a foot plate that feet were nailed to. But what we have done is corrupted it and made it point to the right up and to the left down to symbolize the repentant thief to the right of Jesus. The repentant go to heaven, the unrepentant go to hell. And that kind of just stuck as a Russian expression. Is really the Greeks don't use it. Slavs are the only ones who use that cross.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
I don't know about anybody else, but when you talked Sunday last time about saying about the circus and the carnival of Christmas and stuff, seemed like we still have like Dean's mom and there's other people that
of course.
American.
We have, the church understands that we have obligations with family. And that's something that, is not going to go away anytime soon for us living in the West. We do have obligations. The church certainly understands that. But we also have to remember that we are Orthodox. And that, to really get into that celebration and to just dive into it head first and say, it's Christmas, and start really getting into it, gives our soul the wrong message. And it tends to really leave us kind of tired of it by the time nativity rolls around. So we have to maintain some restraint during those times, during the Western celebrations, because if we don't, we won't be able to really celebrate nativity. And that's what I'm concerned with, that people do that, and we have friends in the OCA or friends from the Greeks or Americans. We marry outside the church, and you're Italian, your family, everything else. It would be sinful not to go there on Christmas Day, on Western Christmas, and eat with them and celebrate with them. That would be insulting. You have to, you have to do that. But you also have to, kind of hold back a little bit and understand that this is not Christmas. That Christmas is still to come for us, and that is the holy day. This is just something that we have to participate in because of friendliness. We have to keep peace in our families. It's extremely important to keep peace in the family, to show love and tolerance, and we accept those people who are closest to us, even though they're not in the church. We have to love them. We have to celebrate. We can't to ignore them. Would be horrible. And I kind of love that. Christ said, "You will know who people will know my disciples by the way they love each other." Well, I'm not going to go over Mama's house anymore because they're New Calvin. That's not love. If Christ would come down and say, "Well, you're my people. This is what you turned it into. Is this do church thing? It's insanity." So we have to have love. We have to have understanding too. You can't just go childishly and say, "This is Christmas." I mean, we have two Christmases now. We have one Christmas. if we're forced because of family situations and difficult situations that we find ourselves in,